A surge in support for far-right parties in the European elections has sent tremors across the continent, none more powerful than those hitting Paris and Berlin, where the parties of both leaders were trounced by far-right opponents. My guest this week is Sandro Gozi, outgoing member of the European Parliament in President Macron's Renaissance list. How risky is Macron's decision to call snap elections in France? And will he resign if the far right wins a majority? Sandro Gozi, welcome to Conflict Zone.
Thank you for inviting.
Are you licking your wounds this morning?
Well, certainly we are not satisfied with the results, neither at European level nor at French level. But the positive issue is that we are still there, I think indispensable to promote our European project.
Even some of President Macron's supporters are saying that his call for snap elections is a high-risk strategy. But it's worse than that, isn't it? When you call elections at the same time as you have a 65% disapproval rating, it's a leap into the dark, isn't it?
Well, I don't think that we should dramatize a democratic moment. It is clear that the situation which has emerged through a vote in the European election, largely influenced by domestic issues, is that there is a need to clarify the political situation in France. Already the National Assembly was struggling to function properly, struggling to find those concrete solutions that the French citizens are waiting for, and it would have been much worse in the light of this result, because the extreme right, the extreme left would have made it even more difficult to function. So I think that certainly Emmanuel Macron takes a high risk, but first of all, it is in his nature. And secondly, it's the right way of asking to the French citizens whether they really want the extreme right in government or they want a reform, a National Assembly which carry out reform in another way. So I think that it is time to clarify the situation.
Macron told his team after the results came in, "I prefer writing history rather than submitting to it." Doesn't that suggest that this is a last-ditch effort to do something, anything, to regain political authority? Because the results have been quite a slap in his face, haven't they?
The results, as I say, are not satisfying. Macron is the one who has been re-elected twice, beating the extreme right. It is clear that he doesn't want to submit to the events. He wants to take political initiative, and this is one of the political initiative which he thought it was useful to take, because it is clear, I repeat, the French voters have shown dissatisfaction and impatience. Dissatisfaction, that means that they want other solution or more effective solutions. Impatient, that they want things to happen. Neither the one nor the other, neither effectiveness, fastness could be ensured by the National Assembly as it stands now. So I think that he was right to ask for a democratic choice and to do it quickly, because this country cannot afford to remain in a stalemate for a long time.
So what you're saying basically is that he's trying to reboot a struggling presidency and a party that's had to limp along without an overall majority in Parliament since 2022.
I think he's listening to the voters, and the voters say we want things to happen. And the debate during this European election, this is our failure. We then managed to keep the focus of the debate on the real European issues. It was largely dominated by purchasing power, by insecurity, by issues that belong to the national sphere, and belong to the competence of the National Assembly.
But what makes him think he can? What makes him think he can reach the voters in 3 weeks when he's had 2 years in power and he hasn't managed to reach them in that time?
Well, I mean, first of all, we will see what those 15-20% of voters which was decided to abstain at the European election, what they will decide to do. And secondly, he will ask to the voters whether they really want the extreme right in government to take on responsibilities, or if they want to give a clear majority to his reformist project. Today, we don't have a majority of the extreme right, but we don't have even a clear majority for the presidential coalition, and this is why we are struggling, and this is why the National Assembly is basically blocked. It would have been totally paralyzed after this election. So I mean,
it could be paralyzed again, couldn't it? It could be paralyzed again.
It could be. I mean, it is the French voter will decide. It's sort of. I mean, everybody must take on his own responsibilities. Even the voters must take on the responsibility. They are dissatisfied. They are impatient with this situation. They will have to decide whether they want to give a majority to the president or they want to give a majority to the extreme right.
President Macron has 3 years left in office. If his party does worse than expected in the parliamentary elections, might he resign?
I don't think so, because the French voters has clearly decided that they wanted him for another 5 years term in 2022. So I think that...
yeah, but he's damaged goods politically, isn't he? He's a deeply unpopular president, let's face it.
But the French has already made their choice about the president. They must make their choice about which parliament they want. And the parliament which came out after the victory of President Macron in 2022 was a parliament where it was very difficult to legislate, very difficult to work out concrete and effective solutions. And now we will see whether on the 7th of July, the French will decide to have a much more effective National Assembly around which project.
If Macron himself doesn't go, could some in his government decide to jump ship?
Well, I mean, I don't see anybody now wanting to get out of the presidential team. I think that all the leaders clearly declare that they wanted to reunite, that it is clear that the issues at stake are huge, and there is need for union in the presidential majority and for refundation of the political project. It is clear that there is a democratic crisis, and there is the need also to reform the way democracy and politics are organized, and these are certainly things that an efficient parliament with a clear majority could work on. There are social answers, there are economic answers, but there are also issues around democratic participation.
I want to talk about reforms a bit later on and press you a bit on that. But I'm wondering how much murmuring there is inside President Macron's party. One of his own outgoing MPs, Emmanuel Macron, said everything points to the National Rally winning a relative or absolute majority. So that's a pessimistic view of how this election will end up, isn't it?
Well, you should ask him. You should ask Pellerin, not me. I didn't make this declaration. I didn't make this declaration. He made it. I think that the battle is absolutely open, and I think that it is time. I repeat, for responsibility, for clear choices for everybody. It is absolutely not true that, as in the European election, there was a wave in favor of the national rally. This must be confirmed at the legislative elections. The issue will be completely different. Marine Le Pen and Jordan Bardella will have to clearly say what their project for France is. It's very unclear to me today, and I think it will be very unclear also for the French voters. But each election, it is a story apart, and I think that what we have to do is to prepare and to do the battle in each constituency. The issues are totally open. I hope also that the so-called democratic forces will take on the responsibility before and especially after the election, because I don't think that the extreme right should rule this country.
Can you see President Macron sharing power in what the French call cohabitation with a prime minister from the far right, from the National Rally?
I think that as any president before him, he will accept the result of the election, any result. I mean, whatever the result will be. It has happened to Mitterrand. It has happened to Chirac. I hope it won't happen to Macron. I hope that there will be a clear majority for the president. But he will certainly apply the Constitution.
Mr. Gozi, to listen to some of the doom-laden pronouncements from around Europe, some people seem to be treating these results as a cataclysmic shock. But the rise of the far right is no surprise, is it? It was forecast and illustrated by polls around the EU for a very long time. So why the surprise? The scale of their victory?
I think on one hand, the scale, because on objective ground, it's very high, and Marine Le Pen party is the first party in terms of party in the European Parliament. So certainly it is clear that there is it is a big victory for them. I would say that more because France is a key country for the European integration. It's not only a founding members, but has been always the most influential country together with Germany, and it has always managed so far to block the rise of the extreme right, differently, for example, from Italy. And to see now that the extreme right could seize the power in the national parliament, it is certainly a shock, not only in Paris, but around Europe. I understand it is, I think, for historical reasons and for the key role that France, and especially now Emmanuel Macron, has played since 2017.
Let's look, if we may, at why voters have turned to the far right, so many of them, in fact. Deputy President of the EU Commission, Vera Jourova, said on this programme last month that centrist politicians hadn't done enough to offer an alternative to the right. The centre-right European People's Party leader Manfred Weber said part of the problem was weak leaders like Macron and Scholz, who no longer had widespread public support. Those are pretty serious indictments. Do you agree with that?
No, I don't agree. I don't agree with Manfred Weber when they say that Emmanuel Macron is a weak leader, and he has shown even in this very difficult and courageous decision that is he can have other default, but certainly doesn't lack neither leadership nor courage.
But he and Scholz have been polling around 16-17%. That's it. That's not much in the way of public support, is it?
Well, let's consider the extraordinary historical period we are living. Let's consider that we are getting out. We got out of a pandemic. We are living in a period with the war in Ukraine, with barbarism which has come back in the Middle East, with certainly, and France did much better than other countries in terms of fighting against inflation and keeping the purchasing power of citizens, of consumers, but still the energy crisis has hit also this country. There is fear. There is a sentiment of fear. There is a sentiment of uncertainty around Europe. And it is certain sentiment of fear, uncertainty, which has fueled the extreme right. They offer easy to take solutions, but inefficient solutions. And so this is what is benefiting, in my view, populist movement and the extreme right movement around the country. And this is why we have to accelerate the responses, both at national, but I would say especially at European level. And from Manfred Weber, I would expect a much more active role of the European People's Party in promoting reform at European level.
Do you not think the traditional centrist parties have become just a little bit too complacent, too self-satisfied? Isn't there some truth in that?
I don't recognize myself and don't recognize Renew Europe as a self-satisfaction group. We have been very active, but we have been always pretty unsatisfied because we wanted to things go faster and go deeper in terms of reform, especially at European level. I would say that we have always shown the right sense of urgency. It is clear that we haven't neither in the French Parliament nor at the European Parliament found the allies that have shared the same sense of urgency and the same will of reforming, even if I would say that we have achieved important results that are producing the right effect, obviously not fast enough for the voters in the European elections.
Why is that? I mean, the EU is an organization that never stops asking people what it should be doing and holding consultations about its role. So why didn't it listen to the criticisms? Too many people were saying that they felt disenfranchised, left behind, unconsulted, and they said so. They didn't like immigration policies, the state of the economy, especially in Germany. And the far right said it would fix all the problems. It's hardly surprising then that large numbers turned to them, is it? Because those problems weren't being fixed even after they had been signposted pretty adequately by people over and over again in the EU.
Well, if you take migration, we have after 9 years of discussion, negotiations, stalemate, we have managed to adopt an asylum migration pact, which gives a good part of the answers that the citizens are waiting for, because citizens want to take back control, want us to take back control on migration, to take back control on external borders, to have more efficient, streamlined asylum procedure to be effective on the return.
But there are countries that have rejected that. I mean, Hungary has rejected that. Poland has rejected the migration pact.
But they are totally wrong. Poland and Hungary are totally wrong on migration since 2014, 2015. And it is not a question of extreme right or not. I mean, Donald Tusk was wrong on migration in 2015. I mean, it's not because they are against that they are right. Finally, we have managed to adopt a solution which is the right solution on migration and asylum. It is clear. We have adopted 3 months ago. Obviously, the voters didn't feel the effect, but certainly there is an answer. And by the way, the extreme right, when they are in the opposition, like Marine Le Pen, they vote against this solution. But when they are in government, they come on our solutions.
Mr. Gozi, you have said the EU needs more democracy. Some have already asserted that these European elections prove that point. But there was nothing undemocratic about them, was there? 190 million people or thereabouts got a free vote in 27 countries. No voting irregularities, no fraud as far as we know. The system isn't undemocratic just because you don't like the result, is it?
Absolutely not. The system is democratic but must be improved. Why? Because even in this case, in these elections, we have got to elect a continental parliament. We have got much more 27 national debates, partly or mostly on domestic issues, rather than a European transnational debate on what Europe should do, shouldn't do, should do less or should do more. And I think that this is the paradox. We are the only one in the world to elect a continental parliament, but we continue to do so through 27 national debates. This is why we have proposed at the European Parliament to elect a number of members of the European Parliament, voting directly the European political parties, because that would be a little instrument to provoke a major change.
Well, let's have a look at some of the changes that may come as a result of the what we've seen so far and the surge of the far right. They will have significant momentum as a result of their gains in the parliament. I'm wondering how they will use it. Germany's Institute for International Affairs says European politics are going to get more polarizing, more politicized, and more populist. Which policies do you think will be most affected by the changes?
Well, first of all, I would say that it is important that the European Parliament confirm its pro-European majority, and the numbers are on our side, because if you put together the seats of Renew of the European People's Party or the Social Democrat, we got more than 400 out of 720. So I think that first, we should confirm a pro-European majority. Second, certainly the extreme right might be effective in trying to block some specific legislation that will depend mainly on the attitude on the specific bills of the European People's Party.
Like the Green Deal, for instance.
I would say, also, although on the Green Deal, the issue now is to find the resources to implement it. I don't think that we have still to work on the legislation. I think the strategic legislative framework is there. Now we have to focus on the resources to finance the green transition. I would say that this is the main issue. But
what about Ukraine? What about the assistance to Ukraine? Weapons, ammunition, cash?
Well, I mean, I hope that we will continue to take a very strong pro-Ukrainian stances. On that, within the extreme right, there is a lot of ambiguity.
There's a lot of support for Moscow, isn't there, among the extreme right?
From Marine Le Pen.
So this is going to complicate the EU's assistance to Ukraine, isn't it?
I don't think so, because around the table in the council where the government are, I would say that there is still a very large majority in favor of pursuing the support to Ukraine. Certainly, in some votes of the European Parliament, if the extreme right confirm the pro-Putin stances, that things could be more complicated. But once again, I think that we should put the support to Ukraine as the highest priority, together with defense, in the new term among the pro-European groups in the European Parliament.
You've talked about the need for reform, which we've heard for years. You also want to bring in majority voting on all major issues. But the smaller countries are never going to agree to that, are they? It's a non-starter.
Well, no, because in the past we have managed to enlarge the majority voting, notwithstanding the fact that there have always been a smaller country than other in the European Union. The issue is that it is clear that even from a less big country, smaller countries, you have to make up your mind. You cannot be in favor of unify the continent, of opening the doors to Ukraine or to Western Balkans, and at the same time to resist to the majority voting, because the two things that are incompatible. The more we are, the more efficient must be the voting system. And also, around the table in the council, it's not that when you vote by majority, you impose your decision to the minority. When everybody knows that at the end of the day, we can vote by majority, everybody makes the effort to bring its contribution and to reach a conclusion. When one country knows that it can veto, it doesn't make any effort. Look at Orban with sanctions against Russia. So I think that it is in the interest, especially of the smaller countries, because big countries sometimes can do on their own. Smaller country needs certainly a more powerful and more effective union.
Mr. Gozi, the President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, says the centre is holding. She comforts herself with that thought. But you have the two big leaders of Europe, President Macron and Chancellor Scholz of Germany, really fighting to regain some kind of momentum. Chancellor Scholz's party was beaten into third place by the Christian Democrats and the far-right AfD. Two big leaders struggling to hold on to their careers. What effect is that going to have on Europe?
Well, I think that now we have the key role, the key debate will be within the European Parliament. Because it is clear that in the European Parliament we must build up this new pro-European majority, and this pro-European majority could even be in favor of Ursula von der Leyen, provided that she doesn't open to the extreme right of this ECR of Giorgia Meloni. And this is the key point. I think that...
but it could just mean more deadlock, more delays in committee proceedings, more hold-ups. It could paralyze the European Parliament, these results, couldn't it?
No, they couldn't because they don't have the numbers. But it is clear that it will depend on the responsible attitude of the three main forces. I repeat, European People's Party, Social Democrat, and Renew Europe. I think that we should open also our majority to the Greens, provided that they get a more pragmatic approach on certain issues, talking especially on the green transition. But I think that there is a possibility of having a stable and effective majority because, and this is the good aspect of this result, there isn't the possibility of the extreme right to have a majority. So, I mean, but it will depend on the attitude and on the consistent action of the three main forces.
All right, Sandro Gozi, that seems to be asking a lot. Thank you very much for being on Conflict Zone. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.